Hello and welcome to the Temple Mount podcast. My name is Shogun. This is, I believe, the fourth or fifth entry into our project of reading the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation together and discussing it. We'll be beginning today where we left off. We'll be beginning today with the beginning of Genesis 26. If you want to find our Bible studies on 1 through 25, and all other content, you can find that on the official Temple Mount podcast on YouTube and BitChute, and join us on the Temple Mount Discord server. It is currently a beautiful Thursday morning, and we have a nice little group here for a morning Bible study. What better way to start the day? According to tradition, I will open the session with a quick prayer. Heavenly Father God, in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we thank you for the blessing of being together with friends around the world to study the Scripture. We ask that you will send the Holy Spirit to help us discern, learn, and grow in wisdom through this process. We ask you to be patient with us and guide us as we attempt to interpret and learn from the Scripture. And we ask that you will be present in all of our lives and guide us towards being the people you want us to be and living the lives that you want us to lead. And we also want to include in prayer all of those in our community and all of those in the world who are currently struggling with personal problems, suffering, health, mental health, war, poverty, or any other problems around the world. God, we just pray that you will be there to help comfort, protect those people. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. So, that being said, so far I've just been doing the reading, works kind of well. How far we go through, we shall see. But we're beginning with chapter 26. Now, the end of 25, we had Jacob sells his birthright to Esau. Just for a quick recap for anyone who missed that or doesn't know the story, Esau, the skillful hunter, is outdoors. He's starving to death. He's coming home, and he is convinced to sell his birthright to his brother Jacob in exchange for a pot of not even very good stew, just bread and lentil stew. I mean, maybe that is good stew to you, but I mean, not a great reward for your whole birthright. That being said, we're going to start now at 26. I'm never sure if I should read the headlines or the titles of the chapters. I think I will this time. So Isaac deceives Abimelech. A severe famine now struck the land, as had happened before in Abraham's time. So Isaac moved to Gerar, where Abimelech, king of the Philistines, lived. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt, but do as I tell you. Live here as a foreigner in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I thereby confirm that I will give all these lands to you and your descendants, just as I solemnly promised Abraham your father. I will cause your descendants to become as numerous as the stars of the sky, and I will give them all these lands. And through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. It will do this because Abraham listened to me and obeyed all my requirements, commands, decrees, and instructions." So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men who lived there asked Isaac about his wife Rebekah, he said, "She is my sister." He was afraid to say, "She is my wife." He thought, "They will kill me to get her because she is so beautiful." So I'm generally not going to try to interrupt the reading with commentary, but I just like to point out this is now the fourth time, I believe, that this exact sequence has played out, this exact logic, this exact justification that he's going to pretend that this person is his sister when it's actually his wife because she's so beautiful that everyone will want to take her. And again, just a reminder at this point that this lady is 100 years old, and apparently this 100-year-old lady cannot go anywhere without everybody trying to take her because she's so beautiful. So just something to consider how and why that's the case. But sometime later, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out his window and saw Isaac caressing Rebekah. Sheesh. Immediately, Abimelech called for Isaac and exclaimed, "She is obviously your wife. Why did you say she is my sister?" "Because I was afraid someone would kill me to get her from me," Isaac replied. "How could you do this to us?" Abimelech exclaimed. "One of my people might easily have taken your wife and slept with her, and you would have made us guilty of great sin." Then Abimelech issued a public proclamation: "Anyone who touches this man or his wife will be put to death." This just keeps working out for him every time. Conflict over water rights. When Isaac planted his crops that year, he harvested 100 times more grain than he planted, for the Lord blessed him. He became a very rich man, and his wealth continued to grow. He acquired so many flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and servants that the Philistines became jealous of him. So the Philistines filled up all of Isaac's wells with dirt. Ooh, that's cold. These were the wells that had been dug by the servants of his father Abraham. Finally, Abimelech ordered Isaac to leave the country. "Go somewhere else," he said, "for you have become too powerful for us." So Isaac moved away to the Gerar Valley, where he set up their tents and settled down. He reopened the wells his father had dug, which the Philistines had filled in after Abraham's death. Isaac also restored the names Abraham had given them. Isaac's servants also dug in the Gerar Valley and discovered a well of fresh water. But then the shepherds from Gerar came and claimed the spring. "This is our water," they said, and they argued over it with Isaac's herdsmen. So Isaac named the well Esek, which means argument. Isaac's men then dug another well, but again there was a dispute over it. So Isaac named it Sitnah, which means hostility. Abandoning that one, Isaac moved on and dug another well. This time there was no dispute over it, so Isaac named the place Rehoboth, which means open space. For he said, "At last the Lord has created enough space for us to prosper in this land." From there Isaac moved to Beersheba, where the Lord appeared to him on the night of his arrival. "I am the God of your father Abraham," he said. "Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you. I will multiply your descendants, and they will become a great nation. I will do this because of my promise to Abraham, my servant." Then Isaac built an altar there and worshipped the Lord. He set up his camp at that place, and his servants dug another well. Isaac's covenant with Abimelech. One day, King Abimelech came from Gerar with his advisor Ahuzath, and also Phicol, his army commander, or Phicol. Why have you come here?" Isaac asked. "You obviously hate me since you kicked me off your land." They replied, "We can plainly see that the Lord is with you, so we want to enter into a sworn treaty with you. Let's make a covenant. Swear that you will not harm us, just as we have never troubled you. We have always treated you well, and we sent you away from us in peace, and now look how the Lord has blessed you." So Isaac prepared a covenant feast to celebrate the treaty, and they ate and drank together. Early the next morning, they each took a solemn oath not to interfere with each other. Then Isaac sent them home again, and they left him in peace. That very day, Isaac's servants came and told him about a new well they had dug. "We found water," they exclaimed. So Isaac named the well Sheba, which means oath. And I'm going to do something real quick here. Bear with me for a second. All right, thank you. Which means oath. And to this day, the town that grew up there is called Beersheba, which means well of the oath. At the age of 40, Esau married two Hittite wives, Judith, the daughter of Beeri, and Basemath, what a cool name, the daughter of Elon. But Esau's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. At the age of 40, Esau married two Hittite wives, Judith and Basemath, but Esau's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. No explaining of how or why. Interesting. Jacob steals Esau's blessing. One day, when Isaac was old and turning blind, he called for Esau, his older son, and said, "My son." "Yes, father," Esau replied. "I am an old man now," Isaac said, "and I don't know when I may die. Take your bow and a quiver full of arrows and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare my favorite dish and bring it here for me to eat. Then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die." But Rebekah overheard what Isaac had said to his son Esau. So when Esau left to hunt for the wild game, she said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some wild game and prepare me a delicious meal, then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die.' Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 fine young goats. I'll use them to prepare your father's favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies." "But look," Jacob replied to Rebekah, "my brother Esau is a hairy man, and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? He'll see that I'm trying to trick him, and then he will curse me instead of blessing me." But his mother replied, "Then let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you. Go out and get the goats for me." So Jacob went out and got the young goats for his mother. Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal just the way Isaac liked it. Then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave them to her younger son Jacob. She covered his arms and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats. Then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread. So Jacob took the food to his father. My father, he said. Yes, my son. Who are you, Esau or Jacob? Jacob replied, It's Esau, your firstborn son. I have done as you told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me your blessing. Isaac asked, How did you find it so quickly, my son? The Lord your God put it in my path, Jacob replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Come closer so I can touch you and make sure that you really are Esau. So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's, Isaac said. But he did not recognize Jacob because Jacob's hands felt hairy, just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. But are you really my son Esau? He asked. Yes, I am, Jacob replied. Then Isaac said, Now, my son, bring me the wild game. Let me eat it, and then I will give you my blessing. So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it. He also drank the wine that Jacob served him. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Please come a little closer and kiss me, my son. So Jacob went over and kissed him. And when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he was finally convinced, and he blessed his son. He said, the smell of my son is like the smell of the outdoors, which the Lord has blessed. From the dew of heaven and the riches of the earth, may God always give you abundant harvests of grain and bountiful new wine. May many nations become your servants, and may they bow down to you. May you be the master over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. All who curse you will be cursed, and all who bless you will be blessed. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and almost before Jacob had left his father, Esau returned from his hunt. Esau prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. Then he said, Sit up, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing. But Isaac asked him, Who are you? Esau replied, It's your son, your firstborn son, Esau. Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, Then who just served me wild game? I have already eaten it, and I blessed him just before you came. And yes, that blessing must stand. When Esau heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry. Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too, he begged. But Isaac said, Your brother was here, and he tricked me. He has taken away your blessing. Esau exclaimed, No wonder his name is Jacob, for now he has cheated me twice. First he took my rights as the firstborn, and now he has stolen my blessing. Oh, haven't you saved even one blessing for me? Isaac said to Esau, I have made Jacob your master and have declared that all his brothers will be his servants. I have declared him an abundance of grain and wine. What is left for me to give you, my son? Esau pleaded, But do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too. Then Esau broke down and wept. Finally, his father Isaac said to him, You will live away from the richest of the earth and away from the dew of the heaven. You will live by your sword and you will serve your brother. But when you decide to break free, you will shake his yoke from your neck. So that brings us not even to the end of this. I'll finish the chapter. Jacob flees to Padan Aram. From that time on, Esau hated Jacob. Yeah, no kidding. Because their father had given Jacob the blessing, and Esau began to scheme. I will soon be mourning my father's death, then I will kill my brother Jacob. But Rebekah heard about Esau's plans. Don't say it out loud, you goofball. So she sent for Jacob and told him, Listen, Esau is consoling himself by plotting to kill you. So listen carefully, my son. Get ready and flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay there with him until your brother cools off. When he calms down and forgets what you have done to him, I will send for you to come back. Why should I lose both of you in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I'm sick and tired of these local Hittite women. I would rather die than see Jacob marry one of them. So that brings us to the end of 27. I think there's a lot to discuss there. Honestly, it's such a disturbing story on so many different levels. It's so profoundly effed up from top to bottom. So it also doesn't make any kind of sense logically. So at first I was wondering, right? So it doesn't even mention that Isaac is blind, right? At no point in the story has it said Isaac at this point is blind. It doesn't say that as far as I can remember anywhere in the story, but you can tell from the context that the guy's completely blind because he doesn't know who's coming in. Now, he must be deaf too, I thought, because as we use Discord, I know that I can tell every single one of you guys by your voice. A voice is almost as distinctive as like a thumbprint. Like everyone has a unique voice, and if you know someone, you know their voice. I don't need to look up and see who joined the chat. I can tell by your voice. This is a guy who's living in a tent. He's only got 2 sons. One of them is an outdoor hunter guy, one's an indoor guy. The chance that their voices don't sound very different is very unlikely. So obviously he would know which one of them was just by their voice. it actually addresses this. He even says the voice is Jacob's. So he does actually recognize that it's Jacob's voice, which right there means it's Jacob. If the voice is Jacob, then it's Jacob. That's just straightforward. But then he touches his skin, which is a goat hide that has just been stripped off a living goat like less than an hour ago. It's probably still bloody underneath. They probably just like pasted bloody goat hide to the guy's hands. So the idea is he touches his son regularly. Imagine if you touch your wife or your husband or whatever regularly, and one day instead of touching your husband's skin, you touched a piece of raw goat hide, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's my husband." That doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't feel the same at all. You would totally know from that that it was different. So none of this mistaken identity thing makes sense. Um, and then the other really disturbing part here is obviously he's senile, right? He's getting senile because he's old. And his wife, Rebecca, who seems to be the most evil person you could imagine, plots this whole scheme to disrespect her husband's dying wishes, right? And fuck with his whole will and testament, basically, pardon my language, which is really messed up. And you can see it profoundly disturbs Isaac because he begins trembling uncontrollably when he figures out what's happened. So she's psychologically tormenting this poor man. He's having like a breakdown. Then the son is having a breakdown. He's like wailing, "Oh God, Father, why can't you give me a blessing?" It doesn't make any sense why he says it must stand, right? It was made under false pretenses. It was a trick. So why does the oath have to stand, right? Why isn't it just, "Oh, that's not valid because you tricked me"? And then he says, "But can't you just give me another blessing?" And he curses him. He literally gives him a curse, even though he knows now that this is Esau who did nothing wrong. He gives him a curse. He says, "You will live away from the richness of the earth and away from the dew of heaven. You will live by the sword and you will serve your brother." That's what he says when he knows who it is. Why? What an asshole. I mean, I'm sorry, but what an asshole. Why would, like, all he's got to do to give a blessing is just say something nice. He said something nice to Jacob, who was a bad guy, and then he says something mean to Esau, who didn't do anything wrong. So he could have just been like, "May you always be happy, and may you always find a great wife and have a great kids and always have enough to eat. There, I blessed you." That's all he would have had to do. But for some reason, he curses him, even though he knows who he is, and he only has one blessing, which doesn't make any sense. He can't think of anything else other than bread and wine that he could bless him with. No part of it makes sense. And all the people in the story, from Jacob to Isaac to Abraham, they're all a bunch of scheming, conniving, immoral people who fuck each other over, their own families over. And there's always this thing about how they hate the local women, right? And whenever any other women come in, it's like, now our lives are ruined because these other women are around. I hate these other women. Never explains what these other women have done wrong or why they've done anything wrong. But the main characters are constantly being skis bags. And then again, just my quick like thing, for the fourth time, we've had to hear this story about how, "Oh my God, Sarah is so hot. Everybody wants Sarah." Abraham has to tell everybody that his sister. Every time he gets in trouble for it, every time something bad happens, and every time he ends up getting rewarded. So at this time, I'm convinced he's doing it on purpose. And it seems that his whole incredible wealth that he's generated is just from this hustling out his sister scam. Because in the earlier part, he gets flocks and sheep and goats by getting his sister, basically pimping out his sister, and then doing this, like, it's like a pimping blackmail scheme that he's doing, where he's like letting people take his sister and then being like, "Psych, she's my wife. Now give me a bunch of stuff or God's going to kill you." And he does this 4 separate times. Somehow the word is not getting around. So I just find this whole story just gross. Like, it's just like these people are bad people. Everything they're doing is bad. And it doesn't make any sense either. So I don't know what to think about it.
So I was thinking maybe, like you said, he made this decision to be blessing his firstborn because typically that's tradition, and that he was also senile. And at the same time, his wife Rebecca, um, because she wasn't able to bear any children for him, maybe because other women were given to him as wives to be able to bear children. That's why he had a firstborn that was not from his first wife. Maybe she just decided to step in and take it for her son, who was the legitimate, like.
Okay, yeah, that may
Right?
be one of the details. I don't know if that's correct. That may be correct. I thought that Jacob and Esau had the same mother and father. I guess you're saying that they didn't. Is that the case? They had different
Doesn't it
fathers
say?
and mothers. I
Yeah, I
thought
thought it was
they had the
different
same
mothers.
father, and I thought they had the same
Mothers.
father and mother. They were born twins on the same day, so I think they have to have the same father and mother pretty much. Statistically, it would be very very
They were
unlikely.
twins or just born on the same day?
That's what a twin is, Kashika.
Did it say they were twins or just born on the same day?
It's the same thing, Kashika.
No,
So if I tell you that my sister and I were born on the same day, I have told you that we are twins. And if I tell you that we're twins,
can have two separate children
still
that were
considered
born on the
twins.
same day.
Still
My
twins.
brother and his cousin were born on the same day.
Any children born on the same day are twins.
So I don't recall. Did it say twins or just?
No, that's absolutely not true. Yeah,
Yes,
a woman can have no, it's not. A woman can have two children at the same time and they not be twins.
No, they're twins if they're born on the same day. They can have two different fathers. It's extremely unlikely, obviously, statistically extremely unlikely that you're going to have two children born on the same day who have different fathers. However, they are still twins. A twin is simply someone born on the same day as you. If you're born on the same day, you've had twins. So if you deliver 2 babies, you've had twins. If you deliver 3 babies, you've had triplets. Even if all 3 of the kids have different fathers, you've still had triplets. You gave birth to 3 kids on the same day.
Both children were hers?
I believe so. Yes. I'm not aware of any part of the Bible
guessing, or did it say it?
We read the whole Bible together, and I don't remember anything saying they did not have the same father. Plus, they were born father and mother. Plus, they were born on the same day. So, unless someone remembers something I don't, or unless I miss something, then my understanding is they do indeed. They are legitimately full brothers, not half brothers. Now they could be.
The story I remember,
as far as I know, they're both brothers.
Yeah, they are brothers. Yeah.
The story I remember is that they were both brothers but had different mothers.
Yeah, that didn't happen. I think you're remembering an earlier part of the story, possibly, but I don't recall anything in this last 4 readings about that.
I think the distinction that I was getting confused about is identical twins. So,
well, right, yeah, you can have the same father and mother and not be identical, even if you have the same. So there's identical twins.
You would still be twins. Yeah,
you'd be twins no matter what. Identical, even if you had 2 different parents, you're still twins. That's why I kept saying that's what
they were twins, but they looked nothing alike, right? One was hairy.
Yeah, the majority of twins are not identical, but when you say they were born on the same, because she kept saying, did they say they were born on the same time or they're born twins? It's the same thing. A equals A.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. We just explained why
they have different mothers.
They're still twins, Kashika. If you go to the hospital and you deliver 2 babies on the same day, then you have had twins. It doesn't matter. Well, not different mothers. They're not different mothers. Holy cow!
Is it a different mother? If it's a different mother,
I'm sorry for being impatient. I thought you were here for the previous readings. I'm just trying to clarify the story so we can continue on. So the story that we covered in the last reading, she delivers them both at the same time, from the same vagina on the same day, so close together that one of them is holding the ankle of the other. They're literally delivered at the same time. One of them is holding the other one's ankle. They come out at the same time on the same day from the same mother. Is that clear?
So this was Rebecca and Isaac.
Rebecca is the mother and Isaac is the father. The children are Jacob and Esau. Both Jacob and Esau are born twin brothers from the same mother and the same father. So no, they're not.
Why I'm confused about it is because of the fact that this story repeats itself in the Bible, but with different parents.
Well, there are other similar parts, but again, we've now had this. I've said multiple times: if you're born on the same day, you're twins. And both of you, especially Kashika, repeatedly said, "No, that's not true." I just want to clarify this: the definition of twin, one of 2 children born at the same birth. So I just want to make this really, really definitively clear. Even if, which is not the case, there was 2 different fathers, and they're still twins. It doesn't matter if they have different fathers.
I'm not talking about different fathers. I'm saying it's never twins if it's different mothers. I was just wondering if it was the same mother.
That's what. Okay.
That's obvious. Yes, it is. That's why.
Yeah, I didn't realize you hadn't. Okay, I thought you had been here for some part of the story before now, so that's why I was confused. Okay, so that being said, I'm just saying, it's not about lineage. It's not about genetics. It's not that one of them is her son and one of them isn't. She just prefers one of the sons over the other. She likes the baby son or the younger son. She doesn't like the older son. And so she has conspired not only against her own son, Esau, to screw his life over, she's also conspired against her husband to totally traumatize him and screw his life over because he's trembling uncontrollably when he figures, it literally says he's a poor guy, right? 100 years old, he's trembling uncontrollably because his evil wife and his evil son have just conspired to screw over his son and him. So these people have no love or respect for each other from what we're seeing in the story. and their behavior is just petty, like housewives of little Florida type behavior, like scheming and inheritance scandals. And it's really gross. And it's really sad that pretty much everything that we've read so far in Genesis has been nothing but a story of just like human evil, human depravity, sin. And that's just the protagonists that we're talking about, not to speak of all the other people. So I just find it so strange how the origin of this religion is like the detailed stories of all these duplicitous, schemes and behaviors of these people that are the patriarchs of the modern religion.
Can we read one more? Please?
Pardon me?
Can we read one more?
One more chapter?
Yeah.
We can read one more chapter.
Thanks.
But I'd also just like to point out that, like, it's weird because a story like this, according to the law of embarrassment, you would think is true because it reflects badly on the characters in it. So usually the idea is people don't make up bad stuff about their own culture heroes. That's like a rule in sociology, and everything we're being told here is bad, at least from our point of view. But at the same time, it can't be true because I know that like a father is not going to mistake one of his sons for another just because you put goat skin on one of them when he has the same voice and everything else. It doesn't. So I don't believe this story can actually be true because it just doesn't make any sense. But if it is true, it's very sad and disturbing.
Well, if you're saying that you don't believe it to be true, that means you don't believe the Bible, right? So there must be some explanations that are just not given because it's just basically that maybe it's not relevant, really. You know what I mean? To what the
to
message
say that
is
you
trying to
believe the
portray.
Bible is a spectrum, right? So people who believe that every word of the Bible is literally true as written are called biblical literalists, and that's a pretty small minority of Christians. Most people do not believe that every word of the Bible, including Christians, is literally true as written. For example, most Christians understand that you could not fit 2 of every animal on an ark with the proportions described in the book of Genesis. It's obviously impossible for 100 different reasons, right? So that's just one example. Most Christians don't believe every part of the Bible is literally true because many parts of it are impossible or contradictory. So I'm just saying, as I read this, I don't believe that you could ever take a father who has only 2 sons, who lives in a tent, who interacts primarily with his family on a daily basis, take one son and put goat hide on him and somehow convince the father that it's the other son. It just logically, it doesn't make any sense. Even if he was completely blind, he's not deaf, et cetera, et cetera. So
based on what you were just saying, then maybe it's the moral of the whole story that needs to be taken into account and nothing about the little tiny details that you're talking about.
Well, the little tiny details are what define the moral of the story, and they're not really tiny details. They're the whole details of the story. It's everything we've talked about. But yes, I believe even if the story is not literally true, there's still some lesson to why. That's what we're really asking ourselves here, is whether these stories are literally true or not, or to what degree, why are these the stories that we're given? Why is it important for us to know this? What if God had a purpose for why the Bible came together? Why was it important? And what are we supposed to be learning from all this, et cetera, et cetera? But I'm just saying this plan to deceive an old man doesn't make any sense. Even if he was in severe Alzheimer's and blind, I think it would be a stretch to say the least. But anyways, and again, the last thing the concept that he couldn't give another blessing, where does that come from, right? Because he literally says, can't you give me another blessing? Surely you have another blessing. Why can you only give one blessing? And indeed, I could be like, Teos, I'm going to give you a blessing. May you have a long life and happiness. Hermes, I'm going to give you a blessing. May you always have enough money, and may you live a long and happy life. Because you find the husband of your dreams and the home of your dreams. I could give blessings away all day. All you have to do is say something nice. So why in the world does he curse his son? He curses him. It doesn't explain why. And not only does he not give him his blessing, but he actually gives him an extra curse on top of it for no reason. So we'll read one more chapter, I guess, or 2. Yeah, so that was the end of 27, 28. So Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, and said, you must not marry any of these Canaanite women. Instead, go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your grandfather Bethuel, and marry one of your uncle Laban's daughters. May God Almighty bless you and give you many children, and may your descendants multiply and become many nations. May God pass on to you and your descendants the blessings he promised to Abraham. May you own this land where you are now living as a foreigner, for God gave this land to Abraham. So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to stay with his uncle Laban, his mother's brother, the son of Bethuel the Aramean. Esau knew that his father Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram to find a wife, and then he had warned Jacob, "You must not marry a Canaanite woman." He also knew that Jacob had obeyed his parents and gone to Padan Aram. It was now very clear to Esau that his father did not like the local Canaanite women. So Esau visited his uncle Ishmael's family and married one of Ishmael's daughters, in addition to the wives he already had. His new wife's name was Mahalath. She was the sister of Nebaioth and the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son. So let me understand this for a second. Okay. Okay, so at this point, he's marrying his niece, which in my understanding is incest, but that seems to be the norm throughout the whole story so far. Jacob's dream at Bethel. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. At sundown, he arrived at a good place to set up a camp and stopped there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamt of a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven, and he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west and the east, to the north and the south. And all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised." Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it." But he was also afraid and said, "What an awesome place this is. It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven." The next morning, Jacob got up very early. He took the stone he had rested his head against, and he set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. He named that place Bethel, which means house of God, although it was previously called Luz. Then Jacob made his vow, if God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. So that brings us to the end of Genesis chapter 28, and I'd like to stop there for today. I correct myself. I believe if he's marrying his uncle's daughter, that would be his first cousin, I think. So still incest, but not that's what I think it is. So yeah, so this is a repeating story. These people keep sending their children back to marry family members or people from their tribe because they don't want to interbreed with the people that they are living alongside. There's also another thing I wanted to point out that was a repeat. There's a lot of repeats in just the first 28 chapters. So not only is there the repeat about, oh, this is my sister, oh, actually she's my wife, oh, you're in big trouble, oh, give me stuff. That happens 3 times now. But there's also the thing where, what was, pardon my language, or something else important that happened twice that I wanted to comment on.
I just thought of something about the 4th time of him doing that. The fact that he's not acknowledging her as his wife and he's just introducing her as his sister. Maybe there was some kind of animosity between the two of them, and maybe he had a favorite, which is one son, and she had a favorite, which was the other son, and because of the animosity between the two of them, the animosity being that he wouldn't acknowledge her as his wife publicly, I guess. Maybe she was like saying, "Screw you, I'm going to get this blessing for the son I want." You know what I mean? You never know.
No, I don't know what you mean, because it clearly explains in the Bible at each instance precisely why he's denying that she's his wife. It very clearly says, included in this verse, that the reason is because she's extremely beautiful and other men will kill him in order to take her for their own. So by claiming that she's his sister, he's trying to prevent himself from being killed so that people will steal his wife. So there's no reason I see to think it has anything to do with animosity about who's the favorite son. It's about him not wanting to get murdered and have his wife stolen.
Maybe but she's not too pleased with the fact that he's, trying to save his skin and then basically disrespecting her in front of others.
I don't. I mean, maybe I don't know where you're getting these kind of tangential theories from. I don't see the connection, but I can't rule it out
Well, we were
either.
trying to figure out why it was that she was trying to get, and she deceived, basically through deceptive means. She was trying to get, or she got one son, the blessings over the other son, and you were trying to figure out why he 4 times was, using the deception of portraying his wife as his sister. So I'm just coming
No,
up with a
I'm not
potential.
trying to figure out. So in both cases, the reason is made pretty clear. In the case of why she deceived Isaac to give the blessing to Jacob, it's pretty clear it's because she preferred Jacob. Jacob was her favorite son, and she wanted him to get the blessing instead of Esau. That seems to be pretty clear from the story, and that's the general understanding. Doesn't really seem to be any confusion about why she did that. She did that because she was being duplicitous, and she wanted to give her favorite son the blessing and not her least favorite son. Likewise, there's no confusion about why Abraham was saying that this woman was his sister. It's very clearly stated all 4 times that it's because in that land, in that time, if you had a beautiful wife, someone would kill you to take your wife. So he specifically says to her, please pretend to be my sister so I don't kill and you don't get taken from me. So those things are both explained, and I also don't see a connection between the two. So I'm having a hard time following what you're trying to say. I'm not saying it wrong. I just don't understand the connection that you're drawing there.
Okay.
But the other thing that I was trying to point out that was a repeat, maybe I can't remember it now. There's the whole thing about him getting protection. Oh yeah, the other thing was, this happened at an early point in the story too. A guy comes up to Abraham or to Isaac, and he goes, "Hey man, we noticed that God has your back on everything you do. So please make a treaty with us, and please don't screw with us. We've always been nice to you. Please be nice to us too." So this is 2 different times when people have come up to him who are like, hey, just a reminder, we've always been nice to you. Please don't do anything bad to us. And so, again, in context, this implies that they're afraid of Abraham or they're afraid of Isaac, like that maybe they had a reputation for doing some bad things or they were afraid they were going to do bad things. Because, again, you wouldn't normally just go up to someone and be like, hey, man, I've always been good to you. Please be good to me, too, if you weren't at least a little bit concerned about what that person might do. So these are just the patterns. The main patterns to the story so far, honestly, have been incest, deception, lying, Abraham constantly getting rewarded for bad behavior, and the repeated, cycle of Abraham and his wife happens over and over and over again. You'd think word would get around by now that this Abraham guy is married, but I don't know. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or takeaways from what happened here? I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Like another aspect that's always interesting is like when it comes to finding a wife, they're always like, yeah, you can't marry these like Canaanite women. You must go to this place. So it does seem like there's like an attitude where they antagonize the local population, which in turn, causes resentment. Makes sense.
We've seen it throughout, right? I mean, Abraham has gotten rich by lying to the local people and then using an extortion blackmail scheme, essentially. So he knows that these people don't want to sleep with her if she's married because they know that'll be a great sin. He knows that God has his back. He knows that God will punish anybody who sleeps with his wife. And at this point, it's pretty clear he's consciously using that as a strategy to get money and get power by blackmailing people. So he lets them take his wife without telling them that she's his wife. Then he reveals that they're his wife, which means they're now in big trouble. And then they give him big bribes and stuff like that in order to get out of the trouble that they're now in. And so if it had happened once, okay. Twice, all right, 3, 4 times, now it's pretty obvious he's doing this on purpose and he's doing it repeatedly and he's getting a lot of money. And we already know that he doesn't like or respect the other people because what happens every time another member is brought into the family, when Hagar is brought in, instantly Sarah starts abusing her and hates her and drives her away. As soon as Isaac's sons marry, it says now their lives were ruined because they had to be with these local women. And every time one of them have kids, they say, make sure you send them away to marry even your own first cousin, but do not marry these local women. And when that guy says, oh, you're my friend, they'll give you the thing. He says, I refuse to take any money from you. I won't. No, you're not my friend. You're not my friend, basically. So it's very, very clear that, and then that's why this story is significant. At first you might think, well, why is this little Sopranos type, story about this like family screwing each other over matter? Well, it matters because in the modern world, whole nations like Israel and Islam trace themselves back to these Jacob Esau characters. And this whole thing about a stolen birthright and about breaking the yoke and fighting and enmity, this literally is defining like cultural understandings of people's identities in 2024. Right? Like this is about how God decided which people will prosper and which people will struggle. And the crazy thing is he's not doing it based on any rational system. It's based on deception and deceit and lies and mistakes. And yet for some reason, this is supposed to be like God's holy will that endures for all times. Like because some woman named Rebecca tricked some senile blind old man named Jacob, or whatever, or Isaac, now all of this person's descendants will be powerful and all of this person's descendants will be cursed just because some bad woman did a bad thing a long time ago to some poor old man. And then somehow that becomes divine law for all time, which is very confusing. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, if there's a moral lesson to Jacob's story, it's like, yeah, deception works. You get rewarded for it.
Right,
Like,
right.
what?
And again,
So
like
weird.
Abraham is the one lying throughout this whole story. Abraham is the one lying when he's saying, this isn't my wife. He's lying. And he's basically pimping out his wife or allowing his wife to be taken into situations where she might be sexually assaulted or raped or whatever, because he's letting these other men take her. And he's doing it under deception. And yet God doesn't say, Abraham, stop lying and telling everybody that your wife is your sister. You know, you're doing something bad. He always says, damned are you, guy who didn't know you were doing anything wrong, because Abraham tricked you, so you're a dead man. And he threatens the guy who falls for the trick. So it's just very strange. You think God, if God was being morally consistent, would be like, Abraham, that's your wife, dude. Stop telling people that's your sister. Like, what are you doing? Right? But instead he gets rewarded every time he does something bad. And then same thing with Jacob. Jacob does something really bad. He lies and cheats and steals, and he's rewarded, and he's given a perpetual reward. Esau does everything right. He goes hunting, he gets the food, he prepares it, he brings it in, he's crying, he's begging, and he gets a curse. And these curses are somehow supposed to stand. And even into the present age, these curses are supposed to stand. So it's just like, wow, this is not a good system for whatever this is. Like, you know, I mean, it's not a good system.
Jacob screws over Esau, right? Twice, right?
Mhm. And he also screws over his dad. That's the most disturbing part, right? It's like, it's one thing if you have a brother and he's your older brother and you're jealous. That's still really petty. That's still really bad and scummy. But I can understand a younger brother trying to screw the older brother out of an inheritance. That's evil. But here is his dad, right? Who's loved him and taken care of him and given him everything he wants. He's almost dead. All he wants to do is eat one good last meal and pass on his will and testament according to his ways, and instead he's trembling uncontrollably, right? Think about a 100-year-old man trembling uncontrollably. That's a really sad thing. And then you got his son crying and wailing on the ground in front of him. So they've just devastated the father and the older brother for the benefit of the selfish desires of this younger son and the wife. You know, it's a tragic story. And then the bad guys get rewarded and the good guys get punished. And it's just like, okay.
So that's not the way that I see this story. I see it much differently than that. And in the senses that you say that Esau was hunting and doing everything for himself, and that's exactly right. Is we don't know the heart or the nature of these people. And I've always looked at it as like, yes, Jacob was rewarded because he was seeking the blessings of God. And so one person is seeking the blessings of God, wants the things that God is giving. One person wants a bowl of soup, right? And so he tricked his brother into giving him his blessings for a bowl of soup. And then I went even further in this. I believe that one person's heart was fixed on the Lord and doing what the Lord wanted and wanted what the Lord wanted, right? And one person wanted what they wanted. That's two separate things. And I think that we see this again and again in the Bible, in the story of Job, and many other stories, where a person's intention is more important than the facial way it looks from the outside. The bullet point.
Well, there's one thing. One thing you said there that is true, which is it emphasizes earlier that Esau had quote unquote contempt for his blessings, is what it says. So there's an idea that if Esau did something wrong, it was that by selling his thing for a bowl of soup, he was showing contempt for his blessings. But again, that's very dicey because it says he was just coming back from a long hunt, right? Burning a lot of calories. God knows how long he was out there. He may have been in a state of like physical starvation, right? And when you're physically deprived, yeah, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, sure, just give me some food. I'm dying, right? So I don't necessarily see that as being such a bad thing to sell your inheritance for a bowl of soup. I don't read it as like, oh, he cared so little about his inheritance. I read it more as he was so desperate from hunger, and his brother took advantage of that. But then the second thing that you said is, Esau just hunted, whereas Jacob wanted what the Lord wanted and did everything to try and please the Lord. I don't believe it ever says anything along those lines in the Bible. All it says in the Bible about the character of Jacob and Esau is that Esau liked to go out in the wilderness and hunt, and Jacob liked to stay around the tents. That's all it says. It doesn't say anything about like Jacob spent all his time following God or Jacob wanted to please God. It just says he liked to stay in the tents, and Esau liked to go into the wilderness. And then the third point that follows directly off that is, obviously, if God teaches anything, it's like, be honest, don't screw people over, don't lie, right? And what Jacob is doing is lying, deceiving, scheming, tricking, cheating. And so I find that directly contradictory to the idea that he was somehow the morally better one. He's the one who's doing deception and lying. And essentially, he's lying before God, because Isaac is trying to give a blessing before God, right? And Jacob is not only therefore deceiving Isaac, he's by extension, basically trying to trick God as well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to add something here. So, like, Esau seems like a simple, like, wild man, so to speak. And, like, sure, he's not the most, like, intelligent. Sorry, there are people here. I'm going to mute myself.
Did you want to say something while he's sorting that out to us?
Yeah, this is a subject that many different sermons have been given on, and a lot of different great pastors have worked this whole thing over from a lot of different angles. And I don't think that the Bible needs to intensively say that Jacob was a devout person who cared about God's desires, as more of his actions, the things that he was doing, right? And so I think that it was important to him, right, to receive these things. Now, in today's modern age, blessings are kind of a chance or randomness or luck. That's how many people view these things. But in this particular situation, this person is looking at the thing that he's asking for. He's saying that God has personally blessed Esau and Abraham, and that his divine providence over their lives is controlling that, right? So he believes in God. That's one. It's faith in God, unseen, right? That he has the care to ask for those things, right? So just to be the type of person that even requests the blessings, and it means you believe in God. That's huge. It's huge. It's a huge implication of his character as a man, okay? Is that the things that he was thinking about was God and how he could get more from God. And he was often referred to as a man with a cloak of many colors to describe his personality being shades of all of these different types, right? That he wasn't just a purely honest person, that he was a thief and a liar, that God still loved him. And so we get into the morality of these things. If a German soldier comes to you in World War II and says, do you have any Jews in your basement? Is it wrong to lie to him, right? God says, don't lie, right? So do you lie or not, right? So you have to take some time to think about these things, and it's not black and white.
certainly the question of lying and that is, I think everybody can understand that in the Nazi Jews analogy or whatever. I don't think that applies here, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm glad you're saying what you're saying, because I want someone to offer a different perspective that could possibly make this less of a negative story as it appears to be. But I do have to say, it's like you're saying he cared so much about God that he asked for these blessings and so on. So, well, no, that's not what happened. It wasn't even Jacob's idea. Rebecca went to Jacob and said, "This is what you have to do exactly this so you can steal the blessing." It wasn't Jacob being like, "Oh, I want God's blessing so bad that I'm going to go ask my father." And that's the problem. Jacob, if he was a good person, could have gone to his father and said, "Father, I love God. Can you please give me some kind of blessing?" on honest pretenses. He didn't do that. And it wasn't even his idea. It was his mother. He didn't even want to do it. He said, "Wait, this isn't going to work." And his mother said, "Just do what I tell you." So all he was doing was following his mom. His mom was just doing it for deceptive reasons. It doesn't say anything about him being closer to God than Esau. It doesn't say anything about him loving God more than Esau. All it talks about in his actions is that he intentionally, consciously, and knowingly lied to his father and stole from his brother. That's the only thing we know about his character. Now, when you say the thing about how he could be of many colors and that could mean he had good and bad qualities, I agree. We all do. And I'd like to think God can like people, love people even when they do really bad things. But in this story as written, Jacob does nothing good. Esau does good things. Jacob does bad things. And Jacob is rewarded and Esau is cursed. That's essentially what it comes down to. And the only bad thing that Esau, quote unquote, did was the bowl of soup thing. But again, that's duress. If you're starving, that's under duress. So it's at least understandable. And from my point of view,
you're adding that starving thing. That's not there.
Well, it's very logical to believe, and I believe it is actually there. We can go back and find it, but just logically, yeah, it is there. And not only is it there, it's just logical. Hunting is extremely calorie intensive. You don't usually get to eat while you're hunting. By the time you've made a hunt and come back, you're going to be in a state of starvation just logically. But I believe it actually does specifically say he was so hungry he thought he was going to die, or something along those lines. I can't remember what verse it was. But either way, I'm saying that's the only thing you can take as bad, is that he was really hungry and he sold his birthright for a bowl of soup. That's totally understandable. You're hungry, you need to eat, you'll steal a loaf of bread, whatever the case may be. What Jacob did was conscious, it was malicious, it was greedy based on his own personal benefit at the expense of someone else. It traumatized his father, it traumatized his brother. So I personally don't feel like I should make any excuses for Jacob or say that he deserved what he got. I think what he did here was horrible. And what happened to Esau was also horrible. And I don't see any justice in any of it. But, that's just my read on it.
And so, yeah, when I respond to some of those points, Hermes, go ahead.
I appreciate it. So yeah, it does say that, look, I'm dying of starvation, right? So it definitely says that. And like when someone is in a position of stress, you know what I mean, where they're being coerced essentially to do something, it's not usually a good thing when you take advantage of someone's weakness to then benefit from it. It's a clear exploitation of a desperate man. But you're right, he did give away his rights as a firstborn. With that being said, though, when it came for the blessing, he was eager, right? He was super eager to get the blessing of God. Immediately when the father said, "I'm going to give you the blessing," and he was like, "Go get me some food or whatever," he went out and he did the task that his father requested, basically his last request in a sense, and he did it. And instead of getting the blessing that was intended for him, it was Jacob that got it through deception, and Rebecca, just pure deception. It was very dishonorable, in my opinion. I don't think there was anything godly about Jacob's behavior at all.
So one of the commandments that's given by God, don't murder, don't lie, it's also honor your mother and father, right? So it's another returning character arc, is that characters in the Bible who listen to their mothers prosper. Characters that do not, okay? That's it's as simple as that. We see that in the wedding of Galilee. The first miracle that Jesus ever produces, turning water into wine, is at the behest of his mother. When Jesus says to Mary, "Woman, why do you include me in this?" And she instructs the servant to do whatever her son says. He doesn't argue, he doesn't fight with his mother, he just does as his mother says. And it says at the end of the chapter, because of what he did here, many people came to believe in him, right? And so, just as when we're talking about fairness here, I want you guys to also understand that the Bible says that Esau was hated before he left his mother's womb, that God hated him before he left his womb. Now, if we're trying to make sense and logical and justice of everything, we'll wrap that one up in a ball and sew it up for me. Mm-hmm. How do you make sense of the righteousness of a baby being hated by God before he is born?
Right. Well, and I think we probably talked about that when we passed that, and I think that is obviously totally unfair from our standards and also really messed up. But rather than go back to that, I just want to point out what you said. You said, honor your father and mother. Absolutely. And that's another example of why Jacob broke that commandment in pretty much the most profound way I can imagine, right? His father made a deathbed request that he wanted to eat his favorite meal from his favorite oldest son and give that son his blessing. So Esau honored his father. He went out and did what he was told to do. He hunted, which is difficult and dangerous. He prepared the food just the way his father liked it. He honored his father. Jacob dishonored his father. He lied to his father. He left his father trembling uncontrollably and probably made that man die, rather than dying happy, saying, okay, I ate my last meal. I blessed my son. My last will and testament is ordered. He took away that man's security, his mental health, left him trembling uncontrollably because he had deceived him and lied to him about the most important thing in his entire life. So when you talk about honor your father and mother, yeah, that's a hard condemnation of Jacob, not Esau. And it's another example of Jacob's what Jacob did was so horrible. Like, this goes beyond just like the lying thing. What's so disturbing to me about this is like screwing over your own dad on his deathbed and taking away his peace and his happiness in his last days, and breaking your brother's heart, dividing your whole family in half. I mean, this is bad on a lot of levels. And so I think it's okay to take the story as it is and contemplate what it means. But I would definitely hesitate to try and do mental gymnastics to make it somehow right, or that Jacob deserved this or whatever, because I don't think that can be the message of the story. I think we have to come to terms with, why this is so wrong and unfair, and not say, oh, well, Jacob was like a good guy and he deserved it, and Esau was a bad guy and he didn't deserve it. I think that's probably how a lot of preachers have approached it, but I think that's a mistake, just from my point of view.
I'm not the one who's making a judgment call on this. That's you. You're the one who's saying this is terrible, this is awful. I'm saying that morality is super complicated and trying to add angles of perception to it. Mm-hmm. I'm not making a judgment call on it, and I don't agree with you. I totally disagree. I couldn't think you could be more wrong, and I don't know if I have a polite way to explain it.
Well, you've explained your take on it, and whether we agree or disagree, this is just a discussion. It's not a debate, and it's not about any final opinions or anything. We're just talking. When I say something is wrong, yeah, I'm saying by the standards of modern 2024 morality, the way that we think about right and wrong, all of this would be considered bad, right? All of this would be considered wrong, just like many other parts of the story that we've read before now. There are many, many parts in the Old Testament that by modern 2024 standards are wrong. Now, obviously, yes, morality is a whole complex thing. We could do a whole podcast series about morality, but at a basic level, the things that are happening here would be pretty much universally seen as bad conduct by modern 2024 standards. And obviously this book was written thousands of years ago. Things were different then. We all understand that. But I think, yeah.
I want to add something, because I just read some stuff I reviewed. It seems like really the person, like the mom, right, was just following God's command, basically. I mean, she was doing a whole lot of deception stuff, and it looked horrible, for sure. With that being said, it was God that basically said this will happen, right? So, let me just read it. And the Lord told her, the sons in your womb will become two nations. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other. and your older son will serve your younger son. This is the Lord talking to the mom, right? Rebecca. So, like when Abraham was about to, so I say Abraham, when Isaac was about to pass on his blessings to the oldest son, that was going against God's prophecy, and that can't happen. Therefore, Rebecca had like a godly like mission to do this whole deception
All right.
stuff. So it's kind of sanctioned by God, even though the means to reach that end is just.
And sorry, what chapter and verse does that part come from? It would have been one of the earlier podcasts that we
25.
did. Sorry?
25. So it was
25.
25, 23. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that is a really important piece of the context then that we're missing from today, is that I guess God had delivered some kind of message to Jacob's mother that this had to happen, that the older son, who I guess was Esau, had to serve the younger son, who is Jacob. And so that is why she planned this, not just because he was her favorite son, but because this is something that God had essentially told her to do. And it was necessary to deceive Isaac in order for God's plan to come about. See, that makes sense, at least theologically, as a reason for why all of this is taking place, essentially. And then it leaves us with the more basic question of which Tios brought up earlier, which I think we'd have to talk about at a different time, which is just like why was one of these children hated and one of them blessed before they were born? Because that obviously raises all kinds of questions, because we usually think that God loves people who do good and hates people who do evil. But obviously a baby in the womb, two twin babies in the womb, neither of them have done good or evil, and yet God has already decided he hates one and loves the other. So that's an interesting question to contemplate on. But I think we should probably wrap this discussion up quickly. Does anyone else have any questions or comments first?
I just say that point you just made about the distinction of divine providence is the foundation for many modern religions like Calvinism, right? Is the fact that there is a divine providence from the beginning of time that preserves saints, and that it's grace alone. It's through God's selection of these people, through his grace alone, that is not merit. Right? So I just wanted to add that there.
Right. Grace, with the disturbing context there, that grace is conditionally applied to some people and not to others, rather than something that's universally available to everybody. Because I think Christians all believe, or at least many Christians believe, that we're saved through grace and not through works. But what we usually believe is that everybody can be saved through grace. Whereas what this verse seems to be implying is, Jacob receives grace and Esau doesn't, and this is all preordained. So it's a difference between grace for all that you can choose or reject versus grace for some. And if you don't get any, you're SOL. But that becomes a bigger question about Calvinism and stuff, which would also be a good conversation to have. But I think that is a good discussion, good chapter readings, and we will continue on next time. Anyone else? Last chance, thoughts, questions? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening and participating. I'll just close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, Lord, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, everybody. We will continue our Bible studies and other podcasts in upcoming days. Just keep an eye on the announcements channel, and everything, as always, is posted in the TMP podcast section of the server and on YouTube and BitChute, Temple Mount Podcast Official. Thank you, and God bless.